Welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason. I'll be your host on this CFL talk show, Hussy's Huddle. In this video, we recap Week 12 of the 2022 CFL season. But really quickly before we get started, if you want to support the channel, as always, be sure to hit like and subscribe, and I would really appreciate it. And with that said, let's get started with today's video. So, generally speaking, in comparison to past weeks, I didn't really have as many things to take away from a lot of these games this week. Obviously, we got the big week coming up this week with Labor Day. Obviously, there's always going to be a lot to take away from those games. So, going to be a little bit shorter of a recap video this week, and I'm not going to go into as much detail with some of these games because I don't think there's really too much to say. But starting with the first game between the Calgary Stampeders and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers winning this game 31-29. And this is just the trend that we've seen with this season series this year. It's now done for the regular season. Winnipeg taking all three matchups, but all of these games came down to one score, and if this is the West Final, please sign me up because these have been excellent, well-played football games. Not a lot of turnovers, not a ton of penalties, although the refs did play a role in this last game here. But at the end of the day, just a great matchup on paper and has played out on the field the first three times we've seen them play this year. So talking about this game from the Calgary perspective, first of all, the big takeaway is that the switch to Jake Maier, even though the result was not different and that Calgary was not able to get the win, this was clearly the right decision because you looked at how Jake Maier played in this game. He just looked so much more in control of the offense than what they looked like when Bo Levi Mitchell was there. And honestly, that should continue to improve as we see more development and chemistry with his receivers. So it should be interesting to see what happens with this Calgary offense going forward. Does it continue to click a little bit more at a higher rate? Do they get more guys involved? Malik Henry had an excellent game in this one. 3 touchdowns, over 100 yards. He has been a really big bright spot on this offense this season, and it was good to have him back in the lineup for the Stampeders offense. And then from the Winnipeg perspective, the big takeaway from this game is that Nick Dembski really stepped up and had a dominant effort in this game because, there were questions going into the year about the receiving core, but we've seen along the way this year, you've seen guys like Dalton Schoen, a rookie, emerge. Guys like Rasheed Bailey, had some good games here or there, but we hadn't really seen too many great games from Nick Dembski because he was been banged up throughout most of the season, but he really took control in this one, was really their number one guy, and it's really good to see that. Just one of my favorite players in the entire Canadian Football League there, but at the end of the day, Winnipeg just been doing what they've been doing all year, winning these close contested games, and they get it done again here. And my final note here for this game is that it all but wraps up the first place in the West for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. They are now at 10-1, while the Calgary Stampeders at 6-4. The BC Lions are at 8-2, but looking at what they saw, or what we saw from them this past week against Saskatchewan, not exactly the brightest outlook for them right now. So Winnipeg should coast to first place in the West, barring something spectacular happening the last part of the season here. Now moving on to the second game of the week here between the Hamilton TigerCats and the Toronto Argonauts, with the Toronto Argonauts winning this game 37-20. And this game was all about the quarterbacks, in my opinion. Toronto has gotten pretty solid, not spectacular quarterback play, but very solid quarterback play pretty much the entire season. McLeod Bethel-Thompson has avoided having those 2, 3, 4 turnover type games, whereas Dane Evans on the other side hasn't really been able to avoid those games all season. Matthew Schultz came into the game after Dane Evans originally struggled, but he started to look really good, and then he went out with an injury. So, this TigerCats quarterback room is really a mess right now. It has been the entire season. And I think if Matthew Schultz is healthy for Labor Day, he is probably going to start for the TigerCats because Dane Evans he's just not seeing the field right now, and he needs to sit down, I think, for a while and kind of earn his way back up to that starting role. Toronto was not perfect by any means, had a really rough first half offensively, but in the second half when Hamilton really threw them a bone, literally with all these interceptions, I think that Toronto took advantage of every opportunity, especially Jamal Peters reading Dane Evans, just was locked in on Dane Evans, had 3 interceptions in this one, including a really big pick 6 in the second half. So, huge win for the Argos in this rivalry, and we'll see this matchup yet again for the 4th and final time this week. Now moving on to the 3rd game of the week between the Saskatchewan Roughriders and the BC Lions, with the Saskatchewan Roughriders coming out with a 23-16 victory here. And obviously the big story in this one was the difference in the quarterback situations once again here. Cody Fajardo really struggled the last few weeks here, led to his benching against the Lions the previous week. Comes back into the starting lineup this week, has his best game of the season by far, in my opinion. And I think a lot of that had to do with Kyron Moore coming back into the lineup. I mistakenly said in my preview video that Shaq Evans would be coming back, but apparently he's a couple of weeks out. He's still practicing right now. But Kyron Moore came back into the lineup in this one, and that was huge because Kyron Moore is kind of a do-it-all guy for that offense. Can catch little short passes, turn them into 10-yard gains. And that's huge for Cody Fajardo's game because he's not really that great downfield passer, even though he really did make a couple of really good downfield throws in this one against BC. And then on the other side, you have Michael O'Connor and Antonio Pipkin for the BC Lions, who really collectively struggled in this one. Michael O'Connor was relatively mediocre before leaving with his injury, and then Antonio Pipkin comes in, hasn't seen much action in the past couple of years, and you could really see why. He's just not very consistent as a thrower. He does possess a lot of athleticism, so it'll be interesting to see if he gets to start going forward, what they do in terms of the play calling there. But at the end of the day, I don't know if this team is going to be able to survive playing a much more West-heavy schedule the rest of the way without Nathan Warwick, really. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with this BC Lions team going forward. But ultimately, it is a step back in this game and a big win for Saskatchewan. Ultimately, this could be a huge swing game for both of these teams in the standings. We could see BC go on a bit of a tumble here down the standings, and we could see Saskatchewan gaining a little bit more confidence going into a back-to-back against Winnipeg. If they can get a split in that one and then win the season series with Calgary later on in the year, that would be huge for this team going forward. And this was just a huge confidence boost for them going into the rest of the season. Now moving on to our final game of the week between the Ottawa Redblacks and the Edmonton Elks, with the Ottawa Redblacks winning this game 25-18 here. And honestly, I don't have too much to say about this game. I think these are probably the 2 worst teams in the league, arguably, because you see what Edmonton did last week against Ottawa, looked really good in the second half, and then lays a complete egg in this one to start off. They were down 20-3 at halftime, crawled back to make the score look a lot more respectable, but at the same time, could not finish the deal once again at home. And, you know, just so disappointing for Elks fans. I really don't know how there are still people in that stadium at this point. They have not won a game yet as the Edmonton Elks. So, you know, very disappointing for their perspective. And then from the Ottawa perspective, I think that Nick Arbuckle provided a little bit of a spark. But at the end of the day, you saw why in the second half, why he has been passed around so much around the league. He's just not a high upside player, in my opinion. Really solid floor from him. He makes consistent rhythm throws, but at the end of the day, he's not going to be a guy that makes game-changing plays for you. And at the end of the day, he wasn't the one that closed out this game. It was the Ottawa defense that has been led by a pretty good pass rush with Lorenzo Malden, who was a great offseason signing from Hamilton. So, you know, I think from this game, not too much to take away because these 2 teams played last week, and there's just not too much to say really about this matchup because these are 2 of the worst teams in the league, in my opinion. So at the end of the day, Ottawa gets their 2nd win of the season. Edmonton gets yet another home loss, and it'll be interesting to see what happens and when that losing streak eventually comes to an end for Edmonton. But with that said, that is going to be the end of today's recap. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank each and every one of you for watching. Once again, my name is Jason. If you want to support the channel, as always, be sure to hit like and subscribe. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.